Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about some recent developments in celebrity world, which is the announced separation between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban. Most everybody knows their backstory pretty well, so I'm not going to get into that at all, except just a brief overview, which is to say, Nicole Kidman married Tom Cruise back in 1990. Separated in 2001, largely because of her resistance to becoming a devotee to Scientology, which Tom Cruise was really big on. Then flash forward 5 years or so, and she met Keith Urban, and they got married in June of 2006. And then only recently separated, of course, this September, 19 years later. So today what I want to do is just take a look at Nicole Kidman's chart and separately Keith Urban's chart just as a reference point. Look at their innate compatibility, and especially for Nicole Kidman, look at the dasha and bhukti that was running when things began and when things broke up as well too. Okay, without further ado, let's get into all of that. Okay, so here's the horoscope for Nicole Kidman, which we can take to be fairly reliable. AstroDienst, AstroDatabank gives it a double A rating. She was born at 3:15 in the afternoon on 20th of June 1967. So because of the solid birth certificate birth time, we can be fully confident of the ascendant. We can also be quite confident of many of the amshas, and I'm going to look at the navamsha later to sort of integrate some of this. Okay, so let's get at this. So I'm not going to try to go through her whole horoscope looking at all the yogas and various placements she has. I'm just going to concentrate upon that which influences relationships. So let's look at the seventh house. So there's a pro forma, a protocol that we should follow, 3 steps, which involves looking at the Lord of the seventh house itself, and then the karaka for the seventh, which is Venus. Okay, so first things first, why the Lord first? Because everybody has a lord of a seventh house. Not everybody has an occupant. Okay, so seventh house for Nicole Kidman is Aries. Its lord is Mars. Mars has gone to the 12th house, and it is aspected only by Saturn. So Lord of the seventh gone to the 12th, Dushtana, afflicted by Mars. Okay, that's sort of a poor prognosis, but let's wait and see for the rest of it. Then we look at the seventh house itself, considering its occupants and aspects. What's going on there? Only Rahu occupies the seventh. That is a natural malefic. And so, that's a negative factor. And, Rahu, Ketu ran through the first and seventh can make for, a bit of a odd pairing of couples or sort of peculiarities and circumstances in the relationship. Be that as it may, the Rahu acts on its own as a natural malefic and also acts as a proxy for Mars because it's in the sign of Aries. Mars, as it turns out, aspects back into its own house. And so even though Mars is a malefic, in this guise as Lord of the seventh, that's actually a protective influence upon the seventh. What else is going on? Any other aspects? No, none. We don't need to consider Ketu because Rahu, Ketu are part of a polar axis. No other graha, neither natural benefic nor natural malefic, weighs in. Okay, so we're done with the seventh lord. We're done with the seventh house occupant and aspects. The only thing that remains is to look at the karaka for the seventh. That is Venus for all of us. That's why we leave it till the end, because it's a bit more generic than the particular specifics of the seventh lord or the seventh house occupants for various individual horoscopes. But still, we must look at it in the end. So Venus's karaka for the seventh is ordinary by sign, but it occupies a good house, the 10th. What are the influences upon it? There are no aspects upon it, but it is associated with the prime benefic Jupiter, which is furthermore exalted in Cancer. So that's a very benign and protective influence on the karaka. But as we saw, the seventh lord is afflicted, and the seventh house itself is occupied by a natural malefic. Overall, it's a it's a bit difficult, and so it can mean strife and conflict in relationships and ups and downs and some degree of irregularity. So what's Nicole Kidman's history? Prior to Tom Cruise, she was in a relationship for a while with rocker Lenny Kravitz. At another point in time, in a relationship with British pop star Robbie Williams. And then along came Cruise, and that relationship lasted for 10 or 11 years. Broke on the grounds of, the Scientology conflict. 5 years of an interim with nobody formally. And then Keith Urban came along in 2006, and then that lasted for 19 years until just this past month. So that's, quite a long-running relationship and, really quite stable in the big scheme of things. But, there have been ups and downs in her love life. So I'll look at the Navamsha later. But for now, I'd like to move on and just have a look at Keith Urban's horoscope as well and see what it suggests in terms of relationships. So Keith Urban's chart is not so reliable. We can take a bit of a chance on the lugna, but we're not going to rest any weight upon the Navamsha, because Astrodienst, Astro Databank classes Keith Urban's alleged birth time of 5 minutes after midnight as DD, meaning dirty data, which means that alleged birth time has come from somewheres out on the web without appropriate attribution, no confirmation from birth certificates or baby book or even a mom's memory. So who knows where that came from. So we're not going to lean too heavily upon that. But we'll take it on its face and say, what if? What if he was born at that time? Well, interestingly enough, we end up with the Gemini ascendant, and equally interesting, we end up with Moon in the ascendant as well, too. So whether we do this analysis from the point of Udaya Lugna, the natural Lugna as dictated by a proper birth time, or whether we treat this as Chandra Lugna, merely treating the Moon as the ascendant, surrogate ascendant, then we'll end up with the same sort of prognosis no matter which we do. So here we go with that. So Gemini rising. So as soon as you have a dual sign rising, you're going to have dual signs on all of the kendras. And particularly in this case, the seventh house, you're going to have a dual sign. So what about dual signs? Well, they are prone to ambivalence, indecision, flipping and flopping, procrastination, changing their minds, being fickle, being antsy, all these adjectives that I can throw at the wall to sort of describe something that is not entirely fixed. Vis-a-vis relationships, such a person can have some struggle with the notion of the constancy that's required for a long-term monogamous relationship. Well, okay, look, a third of humanity falls into that ballpark because that's how many dual signs rise in the big scheme of things. So we can't condemn everybody with that judgment just because of that. But, we'll just set it out there for, background wallpaper as we discuss the rest of this horoscope. So then dig into this. Let's look at, in the same protocol as I did with Kidman, let's look at Urban's seventh lord first. So Sagittarius in the seventh, therefore Jupiter is the lord. Jupiter has gone to the third house. That's what we call a mild dushtana, not terribly problematic. And what happens there? It's associated with Venus, another natural benefic, and it has no influence upon it from any other graha. So that's okay. I mean, Jupiter is ordinary, has no strength nor weakness in Leo. So we have an ordinary Jupiter, the seventh lord, in the third house with another benefic. Oh, that's okay. What about the seventh house itself? Well, we have Mars, a malefic. A natural malefic who also happens to be what we call a temporal malefic, owning the sixth house. So that's, doubly problematic. But what's going on with Mars? Is it supported or is it, destabilized? Well, we can see directly across from it is the moon. The moon is a natural benefic. Certainly this one is because it's relatively bright, a few days after full moon. So it aspects that Mars. That's a benefic influence. Jupiter, the lord of the seventh, aspects into its own seventh house, thereby protecting the seventh house of relationship to a certain degree, and at the same time stabilizing that Mars, which would otherwise, cause some degree of conflict. However, Saturn also aspects Mars. Saturn is a natural malefic. It's strong because it's retrograde, therefore bright. But, basically the benefics outnumber it. You've got two benefics, Moon and Jupiter, influencing the seventh house, while you only have one natural malefic, Saturn. So overall, you have some tension with the Mars in the seventh house, but it's stabilized by Moon and Jupiter, mildly destabilized by Saturn. Where does that leave us? Well, before we move on, let's note that Moon and Mars form, a classic passion combination. I mean, it's the good girl Moon in mutual aspect with bad boy Mars. So there's, passions can run high in an individual like this. And incidentally, Mars in the seventh house, from both the Lagna and from the Moon, forms, a double threat Kuja dosha. For those who don't know the rule, Kuja dosha, so-called, the flaw of Mars, Kuja dosha is formed when Mars occupies the first, the second, the fourth, the seventh, eighth, or 12th from the ascendant, or first, second, fourth, seventh, eighth, 12th from the moon, or likewise from, in those same positions, 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, or 12 from Venus. Well, Mars does not do the latter, but Mars is in the seventh from the ascendant and from the moon. So it forms, double Kuja dosha. This is not a deal breaker by any means. It's also a passion combination, but it, can raise issues around independence and control in a relationship. So having said all that, what do we find? Well, a bit of a mixed bag for both of them. That's just on the level of their natal charts. So let me stop this and then I'll put up something different here where we can have a look at their respective Navamshas. So here I have the two horoscopes side by side. Nicole Kidman here on the left and Keith Urban on the right, because I want to illustrate a couple of things. First, basic compatibility. A lot of, I should say all of the professional Jyotish software, and many of those that you have available, as phone apps, will offer something on compatibility. Typically the dashkoot scoring system along, sometimes with others as well too, which is, sort of a numerical rating system, often based on, or typically based on the moon positions, relative moon positions, and what the prognosis means for the couple. And this is very frequently used by, pundits throughout India and of course in the Western world now as well too, as a gauge for, the generic compatibility for any given couple. So we can have a look at that. Before, let's see, I'm fiddling around here with something I shouldn't be doing while I'm talking at the same time. Okay, we're good. If you look at the scoring system, the dashkoot system for Kidman and Urban, the dashkoot score is miserable. Out of a possible 36, they only score 6. Now that's not shown here on this presentation with the two charts side by side, but take my word for it. And if you plug in the birth data and use your own software, you'll see that. So that's problematic, and a lot of pundits, upon seeing a proposed pair such as that, would say, well, maybe maybe there is an alternative, another prospect insight for you rather than these two. So be that as it may, they perhaps didn't have that advice when they embarked upon the relationship. But let's look at some other things, because the dashkoot system is not fully reliable. It's an ancient system. Oh, incidentally, they score 6 out of 36. A passing grade is around 21 out of 36. Less than that, there are likely to be problems in due course. Okay, be that as it may, let's just have a quick look at their two horoscopes, comparing the four most critical factors in synastry or compatibility analysis. So think of these as the four legs of a table, and we're checking to see if they are stable. So basically, you can do this with these 4 points, and you can create a 4x4 matrix, which creates 16 points for comparison. But if you really want to get to the nut of it quickly, you can simply compare only the ascendant to ascendant, moon to moon, sun to sun, and Venus to Venus. So let's do that and see what we get. So in the case of Nicole Kidman, she has Libra rising. Keith Urban has Gemini rising. That's fine. Two ascendants in air signs are in a trinal relationship with each other. That suggests that these are two people that sort of can, fall into step with each other fairly quickly from the get-go. They have similar likes and dislikes in terms of, food, drink, entertainment, social company, integration with each other's friends and families, domestic responsibilities, diurnal habits, whether one's a night owl or the other one's an early bird, and all that sort of thing. And other sort of mundane things which a lot of other people, can observe at a distance. Those would seem to be good. Then we move on to the moon. So Nicole has moon in Scorpio. Quite a full moon. I mean, it's almost full. It's really just a day away from being full. So although debilitated, it's a bright moon. Keith has moon in Gemini. So if you look at those two, the relationship is what we call a 6-8 relationship. If you count from Gemini to Scorpio, you count 6. If you count from Scorpio to Gemini, you get 8. A 6-8 relationship is problematic. It's what we call, in this scheme of things, something of an open enemy. An open enemy in what regard, you might ask? Well, with respect to the moon, it's got to do with our perceptions, what we sense about the other person, what we see, we hear, we smell, we taste, we touch. All those perceptions form likes and dislikes, what we refer to as raga and dvesha. And then they form our biases and our judgments, in relationships. The moon is also, our personality, and it's got a lot to do with the way we communicate. When there is this disconnect between the moons, there can be a failure to emote in the same way at the same time, to be, not as sympathetic or as empathetic as the other person might require. And more critically, a problem with communication, such that, she talks and he doesn't listen, or he talks and, she pretends to listen but doesn't, or some combination like that. A disconnect in terms of communication. Now, if you see that in your own, chart comparison with your loved one, don't be too alarmed, because of all things, we can learn to be better communicators. You can literally go to a library or bookstore and find books to help you to be better at that. But be that as it may, there it exists in their horoscope. Let's move on. Then sun signs are important, for certain things. So Nicole has sun in Gemini. Keith has sun in Libra. Oh, well, that's interesting. You sort of have a flip-flop. There was a Libra and Gemini for ascendants, and now it's a Gemini and a Libra for suns. That's all well and good, except that creates a debilitated sun for Keith. And, that can be some sort of an ego issue in some respects. But because there are suns in air signs, and that's a trinal relationship, so that's actually good. And that's another mark for compatibility. In what regard, you might say? Well, typically about belief systems. That can encompass religion, politics, um, memory, not memories, hopes, dreams, and ambitions for life, sort of what you want out of life. And there can be, contrasts where some people just want to be, fabulously wealthy and famous, and other people want a private spiritual life. And, you make up your own combinations, and there are a lot of differences. But in this respect, we would say that, they would be compatible and or congruent, and there shouldn't be a problem on this level of belief systems. I mean, it does invoke morality and ethics to some degree, and the nature of their breakup sort of raises some questions about that. But without knowing the whole story, who am I to question it? On the face of this, we suggest that the two sons are compatible, although note that his son is debilitated, and there may always be sort of an ego issue vis-a-vis, romantic involvements, the fifth house, creativity, holding center stage, and all the rest of that. Okay, move on to the fourth and last element, and that's Venus, the Karaka for relationships. So see what we did. We looked at the ascendant, which is such a critical touchstone. The moon, because it's always taken as a secondary lugna, and the sun, because it's taken as a tertiary lugna. We have Udaya lugna, Chandra lugna, and Surya lugna. Last but not least, in the context of relationships, is Venus, or the two Venuses, because they are karakas for relationship. So let's have a look. Nicole has Venus in Cancer, a water sign. Keith has Venus in Leo, a fire sign. So those two are not congruent. They are in what we call a 212 relationship. If you count from Cancer to Leo, you get a 2 count. If you count from Leo around to Cancer, you get a 12 count. So a 212 relationship is problematic, and we can label that as a kind of a secret enemy. This is where you don't have a good view on the other person and what they're doing in that regard. And then you can be blindsided by some behaviors in respect of whatever that rule. So Venus is all about affection. It starts with, hand holding and hugging and kissing and, the intimacy of sex, and so on and so forth. So, it's often a powerful factor at the outset of a relationship. As time goes on, that is less of a critical factor in a relationship, although it can be the sticky glue that holds a relationship together. There's a breakup and then kiss and make up phase. Venus plays a role in that. With these two Venuses being sort of out of kilter, that too suggests, a little bit of a problem over the course of time, where affection and sexuality play less of a role in a mature relationship than they did in a young relationship. Okay, last but not least, let's have a look at, and maybe what I'll do is just leave Keith right out of it, and we'll just have a look at Nicole's circumstances. So when she originally married Tom Cruise, she was running a Venus Dasha Sun Bhukti. So a general rule, according to Sheshadri Iyer, who is now deceased but prominent Indian Jyotishi of yesteryear, who formulated a great body of analysis and rules to follow regarding amsha vichara, how to study and interpret the effects of the amshas. So basically, when we look at the navamsha, we are looking at the timeline for relationship development and prognoses for good and bad things or indifferent things to happen. So here's the thing. Here's one thing. Venus in the lugna of the D9 is almost like, or it's analogous to, Venus in the seventh house of the Rashi chart. Venus in the seventh house of natal horoscope is referred to as Karako Bhavo Nashto, which is basically suggesting something like that when the significator of the thing is found in the house for the thing, it had better be perfect or else there will be trouble. And so a similar thing sort of transpires with respect to Venus when it's in the lagna of the Navamsha. If it's in its own or exalted sign, it's going to be fine. But if it's not, there could be trouble. So in this case, Venus is not in its own sign. It's in the sign of Saturn, who's which is at the 12th house of the Navamsha. But more to the point, Venus lies on the Rahu-Ketu axis, which is problematic. So we could consider that Venus to be afflicted. So she got married in Venus Dasha and Sun Bhukti, her marriage to Tom Cruise. Well, Sun in Scorpio 11th, that's okay. The 11th is considered a positive neutral sign. There's an aspect upon the Sun from Mars, but that's it, that's all. One malefic only, that's nothing to really worry about. They subsequently got divorced in Venus Saturn. So married, relatively in the early part of Venus Dasha, divorced in the latter part of Venus Dasha, in the Bhukti of Saturn. Now, therein lies a problem because Saturn, as a Bhukti lord, because Saturn occupies a Dushtana, and in Iyer's system of Amsha Vichara, 6, 8, and 12 are, of course, Dushtanas, but the third house is treated as a Dushtana as problematic as 6, 8, and 12. And we don't even need to consider the third here. Let's just dwell upon Saturn, the Bhukti lord. When she got separated from Tom Cruise, Saturn occupies the 12th house. So is there anything else going on? It receives an aspect from a strong Mercury, which acts as a benefic, but nothing else is going on. So just as Mars' aspect didn't damage the Sun, so Mercury's aspect doesn't rescue Saturn. House position matters the most. So there we had marriage under the Bhukti of a well-placed Bhukti Lord Sun, and separation under the Bhukti of a poorly placed Bhukti Lord Saturn. Flash forward then to her marriage with Keith Urban. Still in Venus Dasha, but now in Ketu Bhukti. So here's Ketu. It does occupy the first house. That is good. But we always have to look at the Lord, and Ketu's Lord is Saturn, and then you're back in the 12th house again. And so that Bhukti is a bit of a mixed review. Positive because Ketu's in positive house, negative because its Lord is in a negative house. No other aspects upon Ketu except the presence of the moon, which is uplifting, it's a benefic. And no other aspect upon Saturn except Mercury. Then the separation, which happened ever so recently. So now she's in Mars Dasha. Where's Mars in this Navamsha? Oh, okay, it's in the 8th house. So we would suspect Mars Dasha is not going to be good for a relationship. And then along comes a Bhukti, Saturn, because that's where she is right now. Mars Dasha, Saturn Bhukti. Oh, both of the period lords, both the Dasha Lord and the period Lord, are in Dushtanas. That is problematic. And there's no rescue for Mars because nothing aspects it. It's ordinary in Leo in the 8th, and there is no benign, never mind any aspect upon it. So there's no saving grace for that. Now, Saturn Mars, what does that echo? Have a look back in the Rashi, and you see a Saturn Mars aspect that exists here, mutual aspect between Mars and Saturn. Why is this significant? Because Mars is the lord of her 7th house, and it's gone to the 12th. Saturn is the prime malefic. Here you have Mars and Saturn not in a relationship with each other, but in the Mars dasha, Saturn, bhukti, they are generating a headwind and difficulties in the realm of relationships only because we're looking at the D9, whose department of life is strictly relationships. But you get this echo where Mars, Saturn are in an antithetical. I mean, these two grahas are, enemies anyway. Mars is hot, Saturn is cold. And, in this horoscope, Mars rules the seventh, and Saturn is a great, you know, I was going to say something rude, but it's a spoiler. So causing frustration and denial or breakdown. So there you have that combination that has come about at this era in her life. Okay, so the only thing I didn't really dwell upon in this analysis was transits. And the only thing I want to say about that is they are both pretty much the same age. They're both turning. Nicole's turned 58 already, and before the month is over, Keith will have turned 58 as well too. So, for those of you who know, the periodicity of the planets, especially that of Saturn, you know that a Saturn return happens around age 29 and a half. So, as it happens, for both of them, Saturn is back in the same sign where it was at birth for the two of them, back in Pisces. And so when Saturn does that in Nicole Kidman's chart, Saturn is back in the sixth house. You might say that's erosive, for the seventh for relationships because it's in the 12th from the seventh. More pointedly, Saturn, repeats its aspect upon Mars, Kidman's seventh lord, which is in the 12th house. By similar logic, there's a bit of an issue in Keith Urban's chart as well too. Saturn returning to its own sign in Pisces, and as you recall, his Saturn in the 10th house is in position to aspect his seventh house and Mars, which occupies that seventh house. So that can cause a roadblock or termination of relationship, each of them for separate reasons. So just to recap, what I did today was basically concentrate on their individual horoscopes, going through the protocol for seventh house analysis, which is always to look at the seventh house lord. Who is it? What is its condition by avastas? In which house is it? And is it stabilized or destabilized by benefics or malefics, respectively? Then look at the seventh house itself and its occupant. Is that occupant or those occupants benefics or malefics? If they're a co-equal number, you'd have to judge their relative strength. Then what are the aspects upon that seventh house? Do they stabilize or destabilize the seventh and any planets that might occupy? Last, definitely, there's primary, secondary, and tertiary. The third factor, Venus, because it's a karaka for us all, we have to look at that, although it's less important than the other two. And basically the same process. Look at Venus, consider its strength, its placement, and its stability or instability, courtesy of benefics and malefics. That'll give you a very good sense of whether each of them unto themselves is has the horoscope to embrace, to attract, embrace, and persevere in relationship. Then the traditional dashkoot system can give you a score, which be reminded that 20 or 21 out of 36 is kind of the passing grade, and less than that is definitely problematic, and theirs was 6 out of 36. And then you can look at the four primary factors in the horoscope: the ascendant, the moon, the sun, and Venus, to compare them each to each to assess basically sort of visible lifestyle compatibility, communication and emotive skills, values and beliefs, and affection and intimacy as another gauge of how those two get along. And if I didn't say it outright, with Kidman and Urban, the ascendant and the sun were both good. It was the moon and Venus which were problematic for them. So back to my metaphor of a cafe table on sitting on cobblestones. Out of the four legs, two of them are wobbly and need stabilization, else you risk putting your elbow down the table and your drink sliding off the other side of the table in a relationship paradigm. Okay, and last I looked at dashas and bhuktis framed within the navamsha. The ninth harmonic is the amsha, the varga, to look at, to assess the timeline prognosis by dasha and bhukti for that department of life. And then, dashas can be a triggering effect as well too. Okay, hope that's been instructive or amusing or hopefully both. Okay, take care. See you another time. Bye.